Oh, we found a use for the touch bar on this thing as well. You can toggle the way that this displays from the thing. So all those many thousands of pounds have turned out to be worth spending. So yeah, I'm Martin Underhill. Should probably flick that forward, shouldn't I? I'm an interaction designer at HMRC. I work for Orange Bus, and I organise front end NE. I don't know if do I recognise one or two faces from? There's one. There's one. We have some. There's one of the other organisers. We've got some front end NEers. At the moment, I'm a dad of two, husband of one, and I'm a painter and decorator. We're getting all sorts of stuff done in the house, so that's kind of where I'm at the minute. This is going to be a web-focused talk, so feel free to leave now if anybody's not interested in the web. I guess it's kind of show of hands who works in some form of the web. We've got marketers even, well, let's count that, or content, or UX, or whatever. That's a good number, so we can carry on. First up, this is roughly how things are going to go. I did take the day off today and spent the whole day pissing around with my files, with my slides. So I've the order maybe, who knows what's going to happen. It may be 30 minutes, it may be 40, and maybe another 2-3 minutes, and that's us. But yeah, I'm going to go through what is accessibility, what's impairment, what's disability, all that kind of thing. Who should care and why they should care, and I'll take you through some examples, and hopefully most of them are user interface patterns. Some of them are more broadly about just general user interface stuff, not patterns. So first of all, accessibility is for everyone, and if anyone hasn't seen this A11Y thing, it's easier to write than accessibility, a bit more accessible in terms of how you spell it. So you've got an A, then 11 letters, and then a Y. So if you see that, it was only about a year or so that kind of the penny dropped for me. I was like, oh yeah, that's why they did that. So feel free to point and laugh at me if I'm the only one that didn't know that. It's easier to write, fits on one line as well, because everyone kept dropping below to the next line, so I wanted to keep everything nice and neat and tidy. So yeah, it's about everyone. It's about people with various impairments. That was about the nearest emoji that I could find to represent that. It's about people without any obvious impairments. Scotsman, I don't know, joke. Yeah, sorry. There may be more references to my ethnicity somewhere down the line. Anyway, the social model of disability. Disability is a social state. If you're impaired in some way, that doesn't mean that you're disabled or you have a disability. So the difference between an impairment and disability itself I'll get to, but they're not the same thing, that's important. Individuals with an impairment are disabled by society, its social structures, and its failure to build an inclusive environment. I'm having trouble reading at this angle. Disabled users are basically just users. Could be you, could be me, could be anybody, could be someone with a more obvious impairment, could be anybody. So who could be disabled? What am I on about? Impairment versus disability. There are 3 types of impairment. We've got permanent impairment, we've got temporary impairment, and we've got situational impairment. And I've basically just plundered what Microsoft did on this front. They did a lot of good work, 2016-ish. I've got some links at the bottom, and I'll put my slides up tomorrow so that anybody who wants to follow those links can have a look at these resources. So those 3 things: permanent, temporary, situational. On the left you've got permanent disability, somebody who has one arm. In the middle you've got an arm injury, so that's somebody who's got a temporary injury. In a couple of months or a couple of weeks, you'd hope this person in the middle will be back to normal. And then you've got a new parent. This is a big deal. You know, so everybody thinks about accessibility and think about this person on the left, where really it's about all three. A couple more illustrations. Blind people are permanently disabled. People with cataracts are temporarily impaired, and there's me swapping the terms together. This is tricky. Correct me if you want. Throw things. And then you've got distracted driver, or drivers generally, because if I'm driving I'm paying attention to one thing, so I guess if I'm accessing web content and things, while I'm doing that, it's going to be, I need to be catered for somehow, maybe. I'll get into that. Auditory stuff, you've got deaf, you've got ear infection, you're temporarily unable to hear, you've got people who work in bars who might be just like in a noisy atmosphere. I think there's going to be an exercise later where they talk about parrots and things as well. That might make a bit more sense when we get to that part of the evening. And then you've got me with my amazing illustrative skills on the right hand side. This used to be a little Viking, so I changed it to a Scotsman. It's supposed to be a Scotsman. I wasn't sure if I should put some ginger hair on there or something, or I don't know. Maybe that'd be taking things too far. But yeah, you've got you know, people who can't speak, people who are who have laryngitis and their voice is out of action, or you've got people with a heavy accent. Who cares? So those are all the people who can be impaired. Basically, anybody can be disabled by something we do on the web, but who cares? Brand designers should care, graphic designers should care, I don't know, stylistic type designers, people who make things look awesome, that type of designer, they should care. Have we got any of those sort of creative folks in tonight? No? Go on. So, yeah.
Don't be modest, that's the thing, just saying.
Yeah, well, people who make things look awesome, yeah, I don't know, it's, don't be modest. We've got UX designers, I get a show of hands there, I'm guessing a good few. Whether you're a content designer, whether you're an interaction designer, you are, all those sorts of things. Front-end developers, we've got a few of them in. Back-end developers, server wizards, I'm not really sure what you call someone who does stuff with Nginx and Apache. Is that like is that DevOps or a sysadmin or? Server wizard. I think we should stick with that. We should run with that. I've got a lot of respect for those people because I wrestle with Nginx and generally fail in my battle. So marketers as well, getting away from the actual developers, whether developers, a designer or a coder. Salespeople, stakeholders, people that are interested in the business and the money making and all that kind of thing on a higher level. Have we got any of the sort of latter non-delivering type people in, or are we generally grafters? Yeah, we're normal people. So I can say that because I didn't see anyone put their hand up. But yeah, so right, why should we care? We know who should care. It's all of us basically, because any of us can be disabled by a website. So. Why should we care? After all, it's an expensive thing to spend extra time on accessibility and coding things and designing things and making things run fast and all that kind of stuff. So why? Because that's a big part of it. I think being a good human being is always a good thing, and it's a good thing to think about other people when you're designing something or building something. You might have a legal obligation. I know in my role in the government, we have to make things accessible to everyone who needs to use our services, which is pretty much anybody. I don't know how much that's to do with because it's HMRC and we need to get as much money as possible, to gather as much cash as possible, but to make it easy for people to pay their taxes is important. And if we don't do that, we could be in breach of the Equality Act 2010. I guess the biggest one, especially for sort of agencies and people who work at agencies, is money. I scoured the Office for National Statistics and some other places to kind of get some rough ideas of how numbers, get some numbers that could translate into money. People with impairments, that's a kind of a fairly obvious category of someone that you might want to market to, or someone that you might want to use your website for some reason. More than 10 people were limited in their daily activities in England and Wales in 2011. Couldn't find anything nationally, didn't have time. So yeah, we've got England and Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. We'll just add to that. That's a lot of people. Another category of people, you've got older people. This was interesting. At the age of 65, the average person will have a disability of some sort. Not quite sure how that ties into that 10 million, because there are 12 million UK residents age over 65. But numbers, big numbers. So that's all from the same place, Office of the National Statistics. So maybe give them a shout and ask them what they're on about. But there are lots of millions of people. Going back into sort of softer things, you've got that person who's got the baby in their hand. I was involved in some UR the other day with someone called Bev, who was an accountant, and she warned me in advance, and I was like, oh yeah, no problem, I've got kids too. She said, oh, I've got a little one, just in case there's any background noise and all that kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, no problem at all. He screamed all the way through, and it was. I think at one point he was quiet. We were thinking, what's happened? What's she done to him? It was, but Bev was going through our particular part of the system, the service we're designing. We do a 1 question per page thing, and I wonder how much cognitive load would have been put on her with the baby screaming, with us kind of asking questions, with her reading the page, the web page itself. How much more stressful that would have been for her had she had more than 1 question on every page. So anyway, I'm going a bit ahead of myself there, but parents are important. Slightly depressing that word live is there, but yes, that's a lot of thousands of little people being born every year. I think it was fairly consistent for a little bit less this year, but I think it was fairly consistent across the last 5 years or so. So I took those 5 years, and it comes to just over 3 million little people. So that's 3 million little people running around bothering their parents while they're trying to do their shopping online, or use a DWP website to get some kind of to arrange some kind of benefits that they're due. All that kind of stuff is important. There's a lot of people. You could even go further than that. If you go further than to 5, because my eldest is coming up for 8, and she still pesters me all the time. I wouldn't have it any other way, but that's children, so the number is bigger. Some children. Back to the driver thing I mentioned earlier. You've got that many people, well, not that many people driving cars, that many cars on the road. Some families have 2 cars, some people have 2 drivers per car. We're in the latter category, so I guess that sort of probably evens itself out somewhere. Still a lot of people, even if it was 20 million, that's a lot of people you could be catering for with good semantic web content that will be able to be read to someone from their voice assistant while they're driving. It might not happen very much at the moment, but as voice assistants get better, new Apple Watch has got web views in it now, so they're, these things will happen. People will start to digest your content in all sorts of different situations that you might not necessarily have considered. I'm going to go back to that again. This might be the last. I hope this is the last time. This was actually interesting. There's my little guy, and so this is from the Scotsman. Scots are more likely to leave their homeland and settle elsewhere than any other English-speaking peoples, which I thought was quite interesting. I'm one of them, I guess. So. But yeah, lots of people. My family are as well. We all moved to England a long time ago. So yeah, interesting. How many? I should probably read the show notes, shouldn't I? I should have made a slide. 20% of Scottish people will leave Scotland, and based on the current population, that's about 500,000 people. So that's a lot of people that might not be able to be understood. Not the biggest number, but that's just Scotland. There are lots of other English-speaking countries that the accent might be strong. I've got a Canadian friend from Newfoundland who had to, or Newfoundland?
Newfoundland.
Yep. So and she had to do quite a lot of reining in of her accent when she moved to York. She moved to. Yeah, so it's amazing accent. In fact, if you haven't heard it, if you go on YouTube and search for Newfoundland accents, it's quite an eye opener. There were some other things a bit trickier to put numbers on, but these numbers are you can probably imagine these numbers are going to be enormous. People who read their phone at night, I often go to bed a little bit later than everyone else. At the moment I'm busy painting, so by the time I've cleared everything up, washed all my brushes and all that kind of thing and had a shower, I get to bed and I want to read a book or something, so I read Apple Books now, isn't it? Not iBooks. I'll read something on there. Sometimes I have a little flick through Twitter, maybe there's a video. I like videos that have got subtitles. Don't judge me when this video goes up and doesn't have subtitles. I might rely on YouTube's automatic stuff for that, but you never know, let's see. But don't judge, it's hard work. So yeah, but anyway, it's nice when people are able to access your content when they can't put the volume up. People on dodgy phone connections, they have to be considered. They can be disabled by your hefty tracking scripts and huge images, unnecessarily big images, all these sorts of things. Commuters, someone who's jumping on a train, lots of people. Anyway, so anti-patterns or disabling patterns. This is I think it's more of a software development term. I think it was Andrew Koenig and he wrote a book called Design Patterns. I remember the first time I saw that on the desk, I thought, oh, it looks interesting. I had to flick through and I was like, no, this is not for me at all. This is like hardcore computer science stuff. But he sort of said something along the lines of an anti-pattern is a common response to a recurring problem that is usually ineffective and risks being highly counterproductive. And that kind of applies to any situation, I suppose, whether it's software development, whether it's your UI. There are lots of things we do that we shouldn't. And I thought I'd drop him in there. Everyone needs a name. So if there's so much at stake, why do we do it? The first thing is the fear that it's expensive, which, as I've mentioned, that's slightly off, look at that. Oh, I'm sorry, to a room full of designers. Yeah, so it's expensive, and but that's not necessarily the case, as I've mentioned above. Look at that, look at the numbers of people that you're able to reach that you might not otherwise be able to reach. So it becomes quite a cheap thing. I'll get into a little bit about habits and stuff as well, or will I? I'll mention something about habits. I'll mention it now in case I don't later on, but good habits, good accessibility habits are a good thing to get into. And if you start from that perspective, then there's a lot of the design thinking that's done for you anyway. You don't have to think about a lot of things. Those constraints can actually be quite empowering and make things go faster. If you don't have to think, oh, I'm going to put the label for the form there rather than on top. Then if you know that you're going to put it on top because that's best practice, then that saves a lot of time. Another reason that we might use some anti-patterns would be because it serves some kind of functional use. That might be something like you save some space in the user interface somewhere by putting the label for a form in the input box in some fashion. I'll get onto that. That's one of my favourites. But that does save space, but it does come at a cost. Might be that just simple, good excuse, lack of experience, you're learning what you're doing, and you might do something. I mean, I've go back through some of the websites I've built, and there are some of these problems. Go back through the history. Everyone makes mistakes, and you learn from them. Some people might do it because it looks good. That form label in the input might look lovely, but that's kind of got side eye. That's kind of how I feel about that. It's something looking good at the expense of the user is not a good excuse. And this is probably the worst one. Everyone's doing it, so I did actually align these. You see that one doesn't jump? Just missed one. But yeah, everyone's doing it. That's a terrible excuse. So don't do it. If you know, don't do it. Or fight the person who told you to do it. Not fight them literally, but kick back. Not kick back literally, but push back. Anyway, you know what I mean. Just try and coach them round and explain why. So shall we talk about why? Sorry, no why. We've done that bit. We should talk about what. So these are actually some examples. Let's see how heated I get here as well. There's some beauts in here. I guess this is the meat and potatoes of the talk. So yeah, I'm sorry. So bad. So forms are one of my favourite things, which is probably just as well working in HMRC as a form designer. So there is a lot of depth. It's a bit like I watched a documentary about suits once, and you think a suit's a suit, and then they get into detail, and you're like, oh god, a suit isn't a suit, or olive oil, or any of these things. Like you can really dig deep into something. And I'm going to start with my favourite, which is placeholders for labels. And I used a very obvious example. This is Twitter's login page. They have some weird things going on the page before this, but there is an individual URL you can go to with the login. I'll warn you, not everyone put their hands up when they said they were, when I asked if you're a front-end dev. That doesn't mean to say that you don't know HTML and smattering of CSS. I am going to be giving you a little bit of code, but feel free to switch off and enjoy the cat gif that follows it. And it's not getting a cat picture that follows it. I'm not doing any gifs, because animation is a bad idea as well, as far as user accessibility is concerned. So that's roughly how that looks. You've got, shall I use this thing? Oh. So you've got, this is your input box, and this is your label, in theory. This is a label, and this is your input box, the box around it. So you've got input, text, type, and that input underneath is a password, and the placeholder for each of these is password and phone, email, or username. That's that and that. So that basically kicks out what that looks like. The code itself is a lot more complicated than that, but that's basically what it is when you boil it down. That's how it makes me feel. So we can solve that. There's basically a screen reader issue as much as anything. The placeholders are when you start typing in that, the text disappears. You wonder what you were typing. There's a lot of problems with that, accessibility wise, from an actual what you typically think of as accessibility. That is an issue as well. Screen readers are inconsistent with how they read them, so non-sighted users might not necessarily know what they're doing at all. That's how I would fix it. I just went into the code in my browser, and I just took the placeholder off and added a thing. I added a label above it, and this means that as soon as you start typing in here, you get your thing. You know what you're typing because it's always there to remind you. Screen readers are happy. Generally, everybody's happy, and it doesn't look that bad, does it? I don't know. It's all right. That's how the markup looks. You've got labels now. You've got a nice for attribute on there, which matches the ID on that one, so they know this is a pair. Same kind of thing. I mean, instead of having the placeholder written here in the input, you've got a label. Just better. Do that, and that's how that makes me feel. I spent too much time looking at pictures of happy cats and angry cats today. That was it was a nice afternoon. So labels that look like placeholders. This is something that people try and solve that problem with. I mean, you can pull it off. To me, it feels like over-engineering. This is a An example from the BBC's GEL, is it? GEL, Global Experience Language. They've got a pattern library. This is the underline for there's that, I don't like that. That's not an obvious thing that you tap and type into. But it's JavaScript dependent. I'm sure they've got fallbacks, but it just really just feels like over-engineering to me. When you click into it or tap into it or focus into that there, the little field, this field label here, zips up to the top left. So there's a little animation which could be off-putting to some users. It might look nice, but it could also do things like cause browser repaint and stuff, which is let's not even start with that kind of stuff. More one for front enders. I have got something further down here in the. Oh yeah, so the label becomes too small. My notes were also off the screen, so I should have made them smaller maybe. But yeah, maybe that becomes unreadable in terms of the size. Maybe it's probably okay, but you never know. Hint text as a placeholder, that's another thing that you see quite a lot. And this is less of a problem, but again, you don't need to do it. So this is an example from Typeform. They've got kind of a quirky thing going on here where they give you like we used to do this in the Front End Northeast website, and Phil Sherry came along and slapped our wrists, which was very fair. And he did it publicly, publicly shamed us at the event in front of a lot of people, which was probably well deserved. But yeah, they've got the whole Bruce Wayne thing there. Password, it'll be our secret. So again, move that out. You can have. I mean, this might not look the best, might not be the best styling, but I just hacked the page and moved that content into a little paragraph here, like a little hint text. So you got your email. You've got your what it might be, password, little quirky clue, or better still, it'll be our secret felt a bit creepy, so I just get rid of that completely. That feels more, it feels better to me. Notice this forgot password link. I'll show you some stuff about that now. Source order makes a difference. This might again be kind of blah blah, what are you talking about, front end nonsense, witchcraft, but I'll take you through the idea of hint text after input. So if you're a non-sighted user, you're going through a form, you get to, I just took this verbatim off the BBC website, so this would say something like password. So you type your password in, or you set your password, then you come off that and it says it's invalid, because this came afterwards, after you put your password in. This probably should be before, so that before you start deciding what your password is going to be, you know the conditions. So 8 characters or more, it might be something like must contain one number, or must contain one non-alphabetical character, I don't know, that kind of thing. Some people put maximum thresholds on there. Yeah. This is probably a bit more obvious. Oops, excuse me. This is probably a bit more obvious. Some people put some parts of the form after the submit button. Does that sound like nonsense? Probably, but we'll go back to Twitter and we're going to look at this piece here. So you've got the login. Remember me. Forgot your password. And in fact, we're not even going to do non-sighted users here. We'll take me as an example. I use my keyboard quite a lot. So what I want to do here is I'm going to tab onto this. I'm going to enter my username, Temper, which I'm reminding you of in every slide. Such a, yeah, shameless, isn't it? I'm well worth following. So yeah, stick your username in there, stick your password in there, and so I'm going to tab. I'm going to put my username in, tab, password. I'm actually just going to use one password. But in theory, I'm going to be typing out 50 characters of gibberish there. Tab on to the next one, which is going to be login, which is login, and this is my problem, because before I want to log in, I want to say remember me. So the order that Twitter uses is you focus in on this. That's your little focus state, which is good. Focus states are good. then remember me, which is daft because that should be before. That's like almost part of the form where you're saying remember me, then submit the form, and then fill out my password, which again maybe should be somewhere else. Bad. This is the HTML. I'll just glance over this very quickly. You do get a picture of a cat after this, so you will be rewarded, don't worry. You've got the button before. I mean, I would probably do this differently. This is not markup that I would necessarily do. It's a bit inflexible, and this is a bit weird that it's inside the label, but whatever. The button is before this lot, so I'm going to go tab, tab, tab. So that's the 1, 2, 3. That's how that makes me feel. Just going to enjoy him for a minute. I'm just going to have a quick sip of water.
That's scary.
I think it's my favourite. So, what I want is this to come first. Visually you can make it look like this, it's fine. But if I tab from username, password, I want this first. Then I want that, maybe somewhere else, maybe more associated with the password thing. But anyway, this one, then login. So that, then that. That would be the order that would make me happy. And that's how the HTML would look. Put the label first and the button afterwards. That's going to do funky things like make this button here. Which might not be what your designer wants, something like that. So you can fix it with just that. I mean, you could do it with Flexbox as well. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can do to just swap the order of those things around visually. This is the simplest and most deeply supported. Imagine your login form had this class on it. And then you're just targeting the button element and saying float to the left, just floats it to the left, and everything else sits to the right. That's fine. And then you get the source order the way you want it, you get the look the way you want it, so everyone's a winner. And yeah, she's happy. More form best practice. I'll zip through these. What are we looking at the time? Have I been blabbering on for too long already?
Fine.
I'm fine. So, make sure your labels have 4 attributes. This is the bit, you remember before where I showed you when that form only had an input, and I said take the placeholder out, make it a label. It had a 4 attribute on it, which referred to the ID on the input. So that if I click the label or tap the label, my cursor, the focus goes to the input that's associated with the label, so I've got more things I can click to get on that form, part of the form. That's it there. You've got the for username and then the ID username there. So this there, tap anywhere on this element and the focus goes to this bit here because it's clever. And that. Thank you for putting up with the HTML. I've got more. But this does. Oh, I haven't got a cat picture after this one. Just we can go back to him. So yeah, use a proper type. This makes things easier if somebody is on their phone. If it's got type tel on the input, it means they get a little number pad rather than an alphabet type thing. So and there's all sorts of cool stuff you can do with that. Browser support can differ. And it's obviously more important on mobile than it is on desktop, but those are good. This is something it's not a hard and fast rule, and I'd be happy to be challenged over it. But if there's something else you can do other than a select, then do that. You could maybe use a radio set or something like that. They're a little bit easier to use, easier to style as well. So if you're a front end dev, the number of extra elements and I was going to swear there. And how would you say it without swearing? Shall I just fuckery? The amount of fuckery you have to get I don't even know if that's a word. Is that even a swear word? So to get a select looking right cross browser is just not fun. You get big lists like this. not necessarily the best thing. I would maybe fall back on something custom built where you've got some kind of text input up there. There is an element that you can use for this in HTML, but it's not well supported, so I would probably fall back on some JavaScript in this instance, and then let something, if JavaScript's not working, then have something more along the lines of this, but avoid it where you can. That's how the code looks. It's a lot of places, and that's not even finishing the A's. Austria, Australia. I can't remember the other one. There's a few other. They're not on there. There's just a huge list of things. Not the best way to do it. On mobile, you're spinning that wheel thing on your iOS device or Android device. Android's probably similar. Anyway, that's how that makes me feel. To select. Use field sets and legends properly. This is a nice one for accessibility as well. If I may be getting too front-endy here, but these things here should be used to group similar questions and to group radio buttons and checkboxes, which already use inputs. So it would look something like this. You've got your field set, which groups the thing, part of the form. You've got the legend, which says choose an option. And then you've got option 1, option 2, and option 3. Obviously labels are already in use here, so legend is the thing which says these are the whatever. After that, that might look like gibberish, so that's sort of how that looks. Choose an option as your legend. That's a label, that's a label, that's a label, that's an input, that's an input, that's an input, and that groups it. It might not be styled like that, that's just default browser styling, aside from the font, but that's there. Oh, yeah. Place labels above inputs, that makes things a bit more readable. That there's a bit too much distance there, they're left aligned, things get a little bit, if you've got shorter words, longer words, things fall to pieces. They're a bit disconnected. It might be nice and in line and save a bit of vertical space, but so what? Make it better. You can make it a little bit better like that, with have them right aligned so that the text would flow out this way, but you still have the problem where you get long labels, and then you might get told, well, just make sure the labels aren't long enough, but in the real world that doesn't happen. It also makes scanning a form difficult because you're kind of snaking down it. This is a much more usable pattern, just stick them above it and that below it. You can do more things with this, like put hint text and all that kind of thing in there as well. Luke Robluski's done loads of stuff on this, and I haven't linked to it in here, but I'll tweet something out or something, because his resources are incredible. And that's how that makes me feel. Split large forms up into multiple pages. I mentioned before Bev with her baby, and the one question per page thing solved this problem. If you've got a whole bunch of different questions going down a page, that can prove problematic to some users on a situational basis. Indicate optional fields rather than required fields. Oh, this is like the stars. If you've got asterisks, what does an asterisk mean? That's required, but what about optional stuff that doesn't have anything? Why not swap it around? But then even then, why not just have the word optional next to something that's optional? Or better still, why not just only ask for the information you need? If it's optional, don't ask for it. So, yes. So yeah, I mean, you've got things like unnecessarily long forms that you can avoid with this. You've got GDPR and jail, maybe jail, that you can avoid with that. So yeah, only ask for the stuff you need. Moving slightly off of forms, this is probably the last thing I'll say about forms. Auto-tabbing, this is a personal bugbear. This is how the government see that. They say if auto-tabbing stops just a few people from using a service successfully, their needs take priority over the many people who might prefer but don't need the feature. It bugs me when I tab through a form, when I'm filling out, paying an invoice or something like that. I go on my online banking, I get to the sort code, I put the first two things in, and then I press tab, and it jumps me, and then I jump it. So I end up on the last form field rather than the first of the three. Just don't do things like that. And I like the idea of, and it's kind of the opposite of solve for the one and extend to the many. In terms of the accessibility thing, it's like, well, a ramp going up into a building, anybody can get up that, but stairs, not everyone can get up that, so ramps are better, maybe, or both. Or but this is the same sort of thing, but in reverse. You've got something you're trying to solve for the many, which is a nice to have. It's a bell and a whistle, if that's how you say that. And yeah, it's unnecessary because you start to irritate a few people. Should we move on to hamburger menus? This is getting a little bit off the forms, but completely off the forms thing. This is more of a navigation thing. Hamburger menus, you must know what a hamburger menu is. Anybody not know? I'm singling people out now, brilliant. great technique. A hamburger menu is something like this. I lifted that from here. It's good. Basically, it's a menu that you hide your navigation behind to what is it? It's a way to save space on your mobile, basically. I'm guessing it's sort of supposed to be 3 items in a list, so you click that and then your navigation items come down. Some people use 2, I think Apple used 2, I've seen 4 lines being used. It's a learned pattern, and it's something that we've all just jumped on as designers and developers, and it's just become a thing. It's got all sorts of problems. I picked a few out. I don't want to go too long about it, but the reachability is a thing. Those things are usually at the top of the page. That's how iPhones look, and that's probably a little bit out of date, but this sort of size is bigger now with the iPhone 10 and 10s and things. That's where I lifted that from. Nice little idea of, this is where your thumb reaches if you're using your left. Right-handed. But you're not going to get to the top where the hamburger menu would live, so you have to actually get off and do something. So it's difficult to reach. It might save space, but hamburgers on bigger than mobile screens bug me as well. I think I might even have had to do that once or twice. But yeah, if you've got a desktop, it might save space, but please just put the navigation on there. It's a style over functionality thing, and that's how those make me feel. What can we do instead? We can all sorts of things. We can pair it and replace it, pair it or replace it with the word menu, which is better. Step in the right direction. It's a bit more obvious what it is. Or you could just put all the nav on the page. You can still have toggles and show hides and things, but yeah, there are better solutions. Moving on, headers with great big images behind them. I took this screenshot maybe a month or more ago. The website's changed since, but it's not changed a lot. I think it's some kind of Halloween theme or something now. But Lush was a great example of something that just shouldn't happen. This background here, there's all sorts of weird issues with this. She's not happy. It takes time to load in. It's awful. Generally, the contrast is inconsistent. The buttons are the buttons. Can you read that text? I mean, it's a nice bold typeface, but down there at that kind of size, when you've got white in the background against it, just not a good idea. There's a whole bunch of things you can do to solve it, but I mean, this is something that I didn't expect, which was a pleasant surprise. Usually when that doesn't work, if say for example the header didn't load in, there's some problem there. Is there a fallback background colour? Are you going to get white text on a white background? That's a question. Make sure you got kind of fallback background colour there. One of the things that we can do to fix it is, in fact, these are in the wrong order. Shall I just skip to that? That's how it looks if it doesn't load in, which is good, and I think that's better. I mean, it's not really on brand. I don't think your brand designer will let you get away with that, but there are a lot worse website headers. You could use an SVG instead. That would mean that it would all be rendered on the page. You could use CSS with a gradient maybe, or use nothing like this. You could use a background panel, something like that, to lift it off the picture behind it. And that's it for patterns in themselves. I'll move swiftly on to general best practices, things with typography that I wish we could do. It's have a nice big body font always. 18 or 19 pixels is the best starting point. I'll let you off if you use 18, but use bigger, because why not? I think my website, content aside, the content of my website is about 3 years out of date, but I've used I think 20. I think it scales relative to about 26 pixels. Nice and readable. Avoid all caps. Difficult to read if you're dyslexia, that kind of thing. All caps are a bad idea. Make sure you use a decent font stack for your system font, so that if the first one isn't present or doesn't load in, you've got things that fall back that look more or less similar. You don't want to be falling back to like Comic Sans or something unreadable like unreadable Times New Roman or something, and just something a bit ugly. But it's a consideration for accessibility. Choose your fonts carefully, and I'll quickly take you through this font here and why I love it. It's called FSME by Fontsmith, and it was designed by Mencap, well, in conjunction with Mencap. What it is it's for people with learning disabilities whose reading is made harder by certain fonts. I mentioned the all caps thing. This is kind of taking that and just running with it. Everything's been considered, from larger dots on there, just to distinguish that from an L that you might run straight into. The ascenders and descenders are nice and tall. The stroke is 17% of the X height, so I don't know if anyone knows what that means, but this is your X height from here to here, basically where the X goes. 17% the stroke is of the X height, and apparently that is the sweet spot tested as far as the stroke width goes. The letter forms are as different as possible. You've got I think they removed that, but they've got they've got a little flick on the D, they don't on the B. I think the P again looks different. They haven't just used the same glyph and just mirrored it and flipped it. And it's got an accessible handwriting style there, an accessible handwriting style A, rather than the little curly upside down E almost that you see in a lot of typefaces. Anyway, I love that typeface, and it looks good. It's not a childish sort of I mean, it's got an element of playfulness to it, but it's not Comic Sans or something like that, which is just kind of which is arguably fairly accessible, but goes too far. Quick word about web fonts. If you're loading web fonts onto your website, be very mindful. So if you're designing an interface that has lots of different fonts on there, make sure that you consider the time it takes them to load in. You've got the requests for the fonts themselves. Those are every font you load in is requested from the server, which takes time, and then it's downloaded. The fewer of those you do, the better. Use formats like WOF. I'm probably going off on a front end thing here, but TTF, EOT. You can serve all those things, but it's not worth the bother. WOF's fine, or even better, you can use WOF2, which is even smaller and better. There are other things like HTTP2 and things that you can use to make those requests and things better, but again, not the time or the place. Consider the number of weights you need. If you've got a website where you've got headers, body, text and things, they're all using the same font, you're probably going to want a bold one for the headings. You're going to want a different weight for the body text. You're going to want bold for the body text. You're going to want italic for the body text. You're going to want bold italic for the body text. You're going to need to serve at least 3 fonts in. Do you need to do that? You can use it's not necessarily as refined, but you can let the browser skew things and make that italic, make them bold, or you could just you could just use one for the headers and then use a different one for the body text. Coming off typography and typefaces, avoid animations, another best practice. Those can make people with inner ear issues or all that kind of thing, they can make you feel bad. It's like the parallax scrolling and all that kind of thing is just it makes me feel ill, let alone someone who actually has a physical impairment that can really affect. Make sure your colour contrast is good. I had a run-in with Mr. Proctor just the other week. Now I am better. I'm a better human being. Avoid using colour to communicate meaning. If you're going to use colours to communicate meaning, make sure you do a sort of belt and braces approach where you've got the word in the colour. So you're not just relying on colour. You've got non-sighted users to consider there. You've got people having the website read to them for whatever reason, if they're driving or whatever. You've got colourblind users to consider there, and there's a lot of those types of people. Putting things right, we're getting towards the end here. I think we've got about, not many slides left. So you can do things like semantic HTML, you can think about your HTML, like make sure you've got that for attribute on your label. That kind of stuff goes a long way, just don't rush. Responsive web design goes a long way. That's not just about the coding, but about the considerations of different screen sizes, different screen heights, widths. Responsive web design is a big deal as far as accessibility goes, and I don't think it's picked up quite enough. Subtitles and closed captions. Again, for deaf people, people with ear infection, people in noisy situations, people who can't put sound on for any reason. Again, don't judge me when this video goes up. If this video is all worked, don't judge me if it goes up without them. Performant websites, those are good for people that are in a rush, people who have ADHD, people with dodgy internet connections, all sorts of people that need websites to load quickly. Don't override default browser behaviour. That upsets user experience, user expectations generally. In the same way that using common UI conventions is a good thing. Not using common UI conventions, trying to reinvent the wheel, all that kind of thing with navigation, it's not a good idea. People expect things, give them what they expect. And to consider accessibility from the start is a huge time saver, rather than baking it in at the end as a consideration and saying, oh god, yeah, these things are all wrong, we're going to have to recode this, we're going to have to recode that. That's not good. If you think about all this kind of stuff from the start, whether you're thinking about your typeface that you're using as a brand designer, whether you're thinking about the form layout or the general how the forms work as a UX designer or interaction designer, whether you're thinking about the words you're using and the reading age as a content designer, there's a million things that we all know and we should be doing from the start all the way through. And it's a good selling point for sales folk. There are. I mean, I've got things like the JavaScript you use intersection observer where you can, and things like that, which is good for loading images in. Image processing on servers. Make sure you serve the appropriate image to the right device. Server speeds, all sorts of things which affect accessibility. As I say, a lot of design decisions are made for you if you design with accessibility in mind from the start. That's quicker. Not reinventing the wheel every time can save a ton of time. It's a bit like a pattern library. You don't have to think, oh, how should this look, and then do another one just bespoke. You could just reach for something and take it. There's a little bit more license than there would be with a pattern library. But yeah, that's a consideration. Constraints are also what make design great, as far as I'm concerned. If you're trying to make something great, then it's often those constraints which lead to invention. Just think of all those users and all that money, and don't test your users' patience. Again, that'll lose you money. There are lots of examples of this that it's just make things nice and accessible, and you're on to a winner. Ta.